So hi everybody, and welcome, Sandra. As I say, I do apologise for the fact that we never did manage to get a live chat with yourself and the dude, Eric Cozy. And I know that's a huge regret for, I think, for both me and the dude, but never mind. I at least managed to catch up with you. I was trying to look through my messages. I'm going to say it was at least a year and a half ago, maybe coming up for nearly 2 years ago when I met you.
Yeah, must be.
Yep. I mean, certainly I'm sort of local, if you like, 25 miles away, but know a lot of people very, very, very close to East. Well, in Newton Grange, New Battle, and East Hazes. So yeah, it's a great area. I must admit, I do like the Dean Tavern. It's where the accordion and fiddle club meets, so it's very dear to a lot of people's heart. I must admit, that area of just south of not really Dalkeith, is it? It's Dalkeith is to the side, but it's S Bank Dalkeith, isn't it? You know, it's a great area. It's a great area. I've been going there since Bonnyrigg, Dalkeith, since 1983. I mean, I must admit, I must be a lot older than you because I used to go to work with your dad.
Yeah,
that shows my age, doesn't it? You know, and such a wonderful fella. He once I had a violin that needed repaired, and he took it away home, and a couple of days later reproduced this violin, and it was immaculate. And so anyway,
I have a concertina here that he restored.
Wow.
Old concertina that he restored from just wrecked, and he restored the whole thing.
Sure. What I do remember about being in the Dalkeith area in 2003, because I remember seeing the headlines and the sort of panic at the time, I suppose, was that Jodie Jones was found obviously murdered, horrific murder. And eventually, 2 years later, her killer was found guilty, was apprehended, found guilty. End of story. I mean, what's going on now? I just don't get this. As far as I was concerned, everything was done and dusted until I had a chat with a former St. David's school pupil who said, "See that Luke Mitchell case? I think there's more to it." What's happened for you since then?
I pretty much knew from very early on that there was something not right about the way the case was being handled. Living right in the community, right in the centre of it, a lot of the stuff that was being leaked to the media, a lot of the local gossip. My first thought was, they've caught this lad red-handed. They must have done.
Yes, yeah.
And they're just going to arrest him, and that'll be it. And then time went on, and he's not arrested. And time went on, and he's not arrested. And I'm wait. If they caught him red-handed, they'd have him by now.
Yeah.
What if it's not him? What if they're letting the real killer slip away because all of this crazy hysterical focus is on this lad? So that was how it started, and for a long, long time, nobody wanted to hear that. Nobody wanted to consider that maybe something had gone wrong here. And it's been nearly 18 years, and it's only in the last 2. So it started with the James English podcasts, and then the documentary, but it's really only in the last 2 years that people have started to say, hang on, or publicly started to say, hang on, maybe you're right. Maybe there is more to this than meets the eye.
So how did this sort of the sort of local assumption of guilt for Luke Mitchell. How did this manifest itself? How did people sort of come to this conclusion that he must be guilty then?
Well, I know now, because I've spoken to people, that the police were going to doors day 2 of the investigation and telling them it was Luke. The police were actually going to question young witnesses, 13, 14-year-old kids, and telling their parents that Luke Mitchell was the killer. Now, I've had those parents and those kids tell me that since. So that was the first thing. The police themselves were going around telling people. Secondly, the media from probably the Friday. So Jodie was found on the Monday night going into Tuesday morning. From the Friday, when Luke's house was raided, the media descended in droves, camped outside his house and reporting that they were taking bags and bags of evidence. Wow. Evidence?
Wow.
What's evidence?
Wow.
So really, from 3 days in, the media, they didn't point to him directly in the first few weeks, but the underlying message was, this is him. It's just a matter of time before they get him. Even the police at the end of the first week said in a statement in the media, we're just waiting for the DNA results to come back to prove our main line of inquiry. Oops, because when the DNA results came back, there was none of Luke's. By then it was too late.
Yeah, I mean, certainly none of the blood spatter that would be associated with such an attack. And I must just ask, I mean, if this documentary that came out, when was it? 2 weeks ago?
Yeah.
Okay. If it's twisted and biased, then how come so many people took part in it, including the head of the Forensic Institute? I mean, if it was just you doing a video by yourself, but this is Channel 4 airing a documentary. They've got legal experts involved in this. I mean, how did this documentary come about?
The film people approached me. I can't quite remember when it was. It was after the James English interviews.
So I remember you telling me about it, because I said to an MP, the local MP, I said that you do realise there's a documentary going to be done about this, and you're going to have to be ready for this, because it's.
So there was lots of talks back and forward. There was lots of difficulties to make film. Every aspect of it was run past the lawyers. We couldn't put anything out. The film people couldn't put anything out that hadn't been checked by the lawyers. So that's the first thing. To all the people that say it's biased, it's biased. It was checked. Every aspect of it was checked by lawyers. The second thing is, let's run with it was biased. It's one documentary in nearly 18 years of one-sided coverage. I mean, really, if you're going to get all upset and say this one documentary was biased in the face of nearly 18 years one-sided reporting in mainstream media, then I think maybe that documentary has got under a few skins, and that's what all this screeching about bias is.
You've touched on something that is absolutely is sort of top of the list for me. But if it's a case of a documentary presents all of the evidence against Luke and then rebuts it all, and basically, to use the American term, impeaches all that evidence, how is that biased? That's not biased. That's being truthful.
It's biased.
But I mean, I just want to go back to, Jodie found murdered. I can't begin to imagine the pressure on the police back then to apprehend, to try and find straight away, because these sort of something like that does not happen.
No.
Does not happen in Dalkeith.
No.
And for that to have happened on those policemen's watch, you know, when they are in charge, when you're in it, it's okay. Dalkeith has a bit of trouble on a Saturday night coming out the discos, 12, 1, 2, and that's it. It doesn't have trouble any other time, does it?
No, not anything serious.
No,
I've
nothing
said it
like
so many times. Nothing like that happens around here.
yes.
And then suddenly, this absolutely awful murder, young girl, broad daylight, summer evening.
Yeah.
The fear and I know I was telling my girls, you don't go anywhere on your own. You're always with somebody else.
Yes.
You tell me where you're going. You contact me when you get there and let me know you've arrived. And every parent in the area was doing the same thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, huge pressure, huge shock. That doesn't explain why they were telling people by day 2 that it was Luke.
Do you know, it's again going back to the dude. I always remember early on speaking to him. There was a great supporter. He is a great supporter of the Stephen Avery case. Mark down in Yorkshire, and he coined the phrase, when it comes to the police, all compasses point north. As soon as one person has a hunch,
yep,
everybody has that same hunch.
And I think what people have to understand as well is by the time the police left Jodie's mum's house from taking the missing person report, they were already working under misapprehensions. So they believed that one of them believed that Jodie had left at tea time with her boyfriend from her own house, and now the boyfriend was saying he hadn't seen her. They believed that Luke was coming up the path on his bike and that Luke was the only one out searching. So you can see immediately why they'd be suspicious. Wait a minute, this lad is tanking up a path in the dark and suddenly stops and gets off his bike and climbs over a wall and finds the body. He's the only one there that finds it, you know, and he says he left with his girlfriend at tea time and now he's saying he hasn't seen her. So you can see why in those early minutes, really, not even hours, minutes, they were already going, hang on, what's the story here, you know? But of course, none of that was true. He hadn't left with Jodie from her own house at tea time. He wasn't on his bike, and he certainly wasn't the only one out looking. So
when eventually they arrested him and he went to trial, there were lots of people that came forward that gave various accounts that, I mean, they didn't differ, did they, from their early accounts?
Oh yeah.
Oh.
There were well, the search party, the family, the 3 members. So to let people understand, Luke was coming up from one end of the path, and he was going to go to Jodie's mum's house. If he didn't see Jodie on the path, he was going to go to Jodie's mum's house. The other 3 members of the search party were members of Jodie's family, and they were coming down from the other end, but each didn't know the other was out. Right, so Luke didn't know they were out. They didn't know Luke was out, as far as we've been able to tell. But they were waiting for Luke at the top of the path and suggested a double check the way he'd just come. The stories those 3 told for the first month all supported the story Luke told, that the dog reacted and stood up and scratched at the wall. By the time they got to trial, the dog didn't do anything. None of them remembered the dog doing anything. Luke just went over the wall and found the body and stood there completely unemotional. Well, they'd said in their first statements that one of them said everybody was in hysterics. Jodie's sister said, I knew from the concern in his voice that it was something bad. He looked like he was in shock. His eyes were wider than normal. So they did say that there was an emotional reaction from Luke. And again, by the time that got to court, that story had changed completely.
It's not the first time, certainly for Making a Murder supporters, that we've heard of stories changing. when you think of people like the Josh Redount and Scott Taddick, the fire getting bigger, growing from 3 foot to 10 foot. And Josh Redount even saying to the police, getting frustrated with them and saying, how high do you want me to make this fire? They're telling him because they've got this narrative that they've got to go by. They're telling him, it was bigger than that. How high do you want me to make? You could tell he was annoyed. The other thing I wanted to ask you about, though, was the again, for Making a Murderer fans, the Kevin Ramlow effect. Kevin Ramlow is somebody that years later said, I got in touch with Manitrock Sheriff's Department. I told them I saw the car. You mentioned something in a video, I think 4 days ago, that you've had people that have come forward that the police never even listened to.
Yes.
They're going door to door, but they're not taking any heed.
And there are a couple of things. One is a story that we heard many years ago regarding one of the boys on the moped. And we were never able to confirm it because we couldn't find the person that had originally said it. That person's now been in touch and told me exactly the story we heard all those years ago. And with good reason to remember it, because this witness knew the person and was very close to him. I mean, in physical proximity that night at one point. So again, that was reported to the police at the time and never acted on. And yet those boys on the moped went on to give evidence against Luke at trial, and their accounts were taken at face value.
Yeah, it is troublesome, isn't it? I mean, as I say, changing stories, not looking into accounts by people. But am I right in thinking that as far as public opinion was concerned, the thing that really sealed it was this addiction with Satanism that was put out by the press?
It certainly played a big part in it. That and the whole goth thing and the Marilyn Manson stuff. It all painted a picture of this weird, out of control kid dabbling in all sorts of, evil stuff. And I think certainly he was 14 years old. The stuff on his jotters, we later found out, loads of the stuff on his jotters were lines from a computer game. This was taken as evidence of his badness. There were lines from a computer game. The Marilyn Manson stuff, not a scrap of evidence to say Luke had ever seen those paintings. And yet the judge, now I think it was at sentencing, said, I believe you carried those images in your mind. There was not a bit of evidence in court to say he'd ever seen them, and the judge himself said, I believe you carried these images in your mind. He didn't explain how he came to that belief, because it certainly wasn't based on the evidence.
But for a judge to say that is so powerful.
Yeah.
It supports the narrative that makes everybody feel safe that we've got the person we're sentencing him.
One of the other things that the judge said in the same passage was that he believed that the effects of cannabis had made it such that Luke didn't know the difference between good and bad and right and wrong. Well, if that had been the case, Luke Mitchell should never have he should never have been deemed mentally fit to stand trial. So again, here's the judge saying something that in law means that trial never should have taken place. If Luke didn't know the difference between right and wrong, then he couldn't have the necessary intent.
Yeah, I mean, you've kind of touched on something that I was going to get onto later on. Is this idea that, you know, if he's this, you know, I've compared him again to Stephen Avery, this idiot savant. You know, he's idiot enough to lead them right to the crime scene, and yet he's this savant in that he's able to destroy any. You know, forget this stupid Parker jacket, which is completely irrelevant.
Yeah.
Okay, it is irrelevant. You know, from what I can tell, the prosecution keep going on about this jacket because it was the jacket that he was seen wearing after the attack that his mum had bought him, you know, and so everybody's coming for, I saw him with this jacket. But you know, let's forget about that. You know, this whole idea that you could, if you're this deranged criminal, this deranged mind, you could just say, oh yeah, I did it. Yeah, I did it. And I'm deranged because I'm a Satanist. Now, I'm only 14 years old, so you get me a new identity and you set me up somewhere else because, you know. Why is he still fighting this after what? Since he's been convicted, 16 years since he's been convicted, isn't it?
Yeah, but he was for nearly a year before that.
So why is he trying to be another Stephen Avery?
I don't think he's trying to be another Stephen Avery. He's trying to be a Mitchell and basically just saying, I will not admit something I didn't do. And he said that for 18 years, almost 18 years, without wavering, without any, and he knows himself. He said it in the film. You know, if that means I have to stay here for the rest of my life, so be it. But I will not.
That's I'm sorry. That is being a Stephen Avery. That is exactly a Stephen Avery's playbook. Want a better word? Yeah.
I think
if you didn't do it.
Yeah. People have to ask themselves. People who think he's guilty have to ask themselves, why would he do that? Why would anybody do that?
Mm-hmm. I must admit, I do find, you know, this whole idea that it was something to do with Satanism, and that was, you know, come up with a motive. Why would he want to do it? I suppose one of the things I would ask is, and a lot of people have obviously recently, since the documentary, have speculated, and I don't want to go down that route. All I was going to ask is, do you think it's likely that whoever did kill Jodie is somebody that she knows?
I have no idea.
No.
I have no idea.
It could be anybody.
The case is so complicated, and there are so many unanswered questions that there is no way of coming to any sort of concrete conclusion. I don't think anybody should do that anyway. That's not our job. But at the same time, if those questions had been properly answered at the time, we wouldn't even be having this conversation tonight.
So fast forward us to, you know, you obviously had concerns about the case. Having spoken to other people, they've had concerns about the case. Even today, speaking with people of all ages, local people that have said to me, you know, things like, you know, I didn't know at the time, and this documentary has shed a huge lot of doubt on the conviction. And some of them have said, you know, it's really terrible what's happened to Luke's mum in all of this, how they've turned on her. I suppose one of the things I was going to point out as well was that, you know, if we still had the death sentence, I can imagine Luke would have been one of the first ones. Yeah.
And people still shouting to bring back the death penalty. Cases like this are the reason
Yeah.
that we can't have a death penalty. You can't undo
Yeah.
executing an innocent person. You can't overturn that.
Yeah.
You know, maybe you can't give him 17 years of his life back, but you can overturn the conviction and give him the rest of his life back. You execute somebody, you can't do that.
Mm-hmm. I suppose
Obviously.
one of the other questions I was interested in is the fact that, you know, the jury, did they have the option of guilty, and not proven?
Yes. So they could have gone. They could have gone with any one of those verdicts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I've said before so many times, the media coverage was so intense,
Mm-hmm.
so relentless, that Luke was already tried and convicted before the first day of the trial. And yet we know it was a majority decision,
Mm.
not unanimous, which means people on that jury had their doubts. We'll never know how many. We'll never know. It could have been 8-7.
That's really bizarre because, you know, looking at wrongful convictions over in America, we look at things going on there that would never happen, or we would like to think would never happen in the UK. But there, jury decisions have to be unanimous.
Yeah.
And yet here we
Even,
are in Scotland, and we've got majority decisions.
yeah, well, even in England, a majority can be no less than 10-2.
Right.
And yet in Scotland, it can be 8-7. We have 15 jurors, as most people know. And it can be a majority of 1. To take somebody's freedom for the rest of their life, it's worrying.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it would be interesting, I suppose, to get hold of the jurors and ask them now what their thoughts were at the time. You know, the fact that they didn't get to hear the changing of the testimonies from when people were first interviewed to when they were. And I think you replied to a message about. Sorry, can you just go through that again as to why they didn't get to hear that sort of changing of the testimony?
Just before I answer that one,
Sure.
we can't approach jurors in this
No.
country.
No.
We can't approach them at all.
Yeah.
If they approach us
Right.
and want to talk about it, well, that's a different thing, but we can't approach them. Anyway, the changing stories. So I didn't know back then about the concept of statements being adopted. And that means essentially, unless, when people get to trial, unless they agree that what's in their statements was what they said and what they meant, the evidence in those statements is not evidence. They
Right.
have to adopt it. So if you've got a group of people that have said all these things in their early statements, and then they go on the stand and they say things like, I didn't say that, that's not what I meant,
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember saying that, those statements are not evidence because the people haven't adopted them. Now,
Wow.
essentially, that's what happened here. Donald Findlay tried to put the change stories to them, and they said things like, that's not what I meant, I didn't say that, they must have written it down wrong, I don't remember that. So now I've thought about that a lot, and they were almost certainly coached before they gave their evidence. That's not unusual, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. It's very, very intimidating. But when you've got a whole case hinging on he found the body, he led them to the body, then if they'd adopted those early statements, I think the level of doubt may have been significant. It's difficult to say with the media coverage.
Okay, so fast forward then, as I say, to this documentary that came out. I mean, this biased, one-sided, twisted documentary, which is all about Sandra. Is it Lean or Lane?
Lean.
Lean. Sorry.
McLean without the Nick.
That's where I got it from. McLean, as you say, but without the MC. So I do apologise.
It's okay.
So how has life been for the last 2 weeks since the documentary came out?
Well, I don't think any of us expected it to go this big, this quickly.
Seriously?
Seriously, you got to
Yeah.
remember, 2007, there was a documentary made about the case. The BBC made a documentary about the case, and it went, ooh.
Yeah.
That was
Do you know what? I'm going to stick my neck out and say that's the Making a Murder effect.
Oh yeah.
That is
Well,
that.
I think the combination of the interest in wrongful convictions generally, especially after the Making a Murderer thing, the James English podcasts,
Mhm.
they started the ball rolling very, very definitely, because that was a big audience that we'd not been able to reach before. So yeah, I was basically just yelling in the wilderness for years
Yeah.
and speaking to small groups, trying to speak to people one by one by one,
Mhm. Yeah.
because that was all the audience we had.
Mhm. Mhm.
Then James English did the series of 3, and that lifted it up to a new level.
Yeah.
And I think as well, there is this huge interest now in wrongful convictions, in when the law goes wrong, and I think it's been a timing thing as well. Yeah, I think it's been a.
I mean, you raise a very interesting point there. The law goes wrong. I mean, Luke's had so many appeals, and they've all been turned down. And one of the one of the things that the law likes to say is that eventually we get it right. It's just really, really. Is it just as I call it, foxes looking after the chicken run, or rats looking after the cheese? I mean, given the fact that not your documentary, Channel 5's documentary, where you've got lawyers, criminologists, detectives, private investigators, and forensic scientists all contributed to this documentary, saying you need to look at this case. How on earth did this criminal review board on 4 occasions deny Luke?
Because, and it's something, again, I don't think people understand. I had a discussion recently about this. People need to understand that the legal system has its own rules. Okay, so it's like a game of football, it has its rules. We, on the outside of that system, believe we know what those rules are and how they work. We don't. We don't. It's a completely different system once you're in it. Things like appeals do not review the case evidence and all of that. They look at the legal procedure.
Yes.
Now, you can convict somebody on legal procedure, even if you've got the wrong person from start to finish, because the procedures are correct. It just happens to be the wrong person. So trying to get an appeal for something like that, it's never going to happen because the procedures were followed. The SCCRC is supposed to be an independent review board that does have the ability to look at the whole case and review it, but they don't do it. They take a similar route to the Court of Appeal, because until 2011, I think it was, if the SCCRC referred a case back to the Court of Appeal, the Court of Appeal had to hear it. They don't anymore. They can just decide not to. So the SCCRC are now second guessing whether the Court of Appeal will or won't find it meritorious for appeal. So now you've got them dancing around in a circle here, and nobody's going anywhere.
Yeah. So they're just looking for what was done in the case from a legal standpoint, and they're not even looking at the, I mean, therefore the forensic evidence that shows that Luke had nothing to do with this, that's not something that they're really looking at.
No. One of the examples, just to give you an example, the two people at the New Battle End who said they saw this lad standing leaning against a gate in what could have been a parka jacket. They didn't say it was, they just said it could have been. And this is what they used. So they've got a so-called sighting at one end, a so-called sighting at the other, and the time of the murder is right in the middle. So this is what they used to make their timeline. But when we went to the commission, I pointed out the likeness of Mark Kane to Luke. Now, these two witnesses were driving down the road. They saw him for a split second. One of them said she saw him in a rear view mirror. And I put to the commission that could have been a mistaken identity. I wasn't saying the other guy had anything to do with it. I was saying that could have been a mistaken identity. How would they have known if they didn't know Luke and they didn't know Mark Kane?
Yeah.
How could they say? The commission came back and said that that point was irrelevant because Mark Kane wasn't a suspect at the time. I mean, what sort of logic is that?
Yeah. Do you know, statistically, the most important, the most common factor when it comes to wrongful convictions, mistaken identity. Absolutely. It is the number one killer, if you like, of wrongful convictions. It is the one that.
Look at the star witness who didn't identify Luke in court. I mean, we're one of the few countries left that has doc identification. Do you see the person in court today? That's not leading, is it? Yeah, the guy in the dock.
It's not difficult to ascertain who you're on about, is it?
It didn't identify him. Yeah. It didn't identify him. So, and the two at the other end where it could have been a mistaken identity, the police took the daily record to these witnesses and showed them the picture, Luke in the parka jacket, and said, "Is that the guy you saw?" How that was ever allowed to stand, I'll never know.
Actually, you've touched on another important thing that we've discovered, obviously, in the Making a Murderer case, and that is the obstruction of justice when it comes to trying to investigate, what the causes of this. Obviously, you've dealt with the sort of legal side of things and all these appeals being turned down. Trying to refrain from any bad language, but your thoughts on some of the media that still try and perpetuate this idea that that the right person was found guilty.
I seriously and sincerely hope they never ever find themselves in that position, because they have hung people out to dry. They don't care that they've hung people out to dry. And what they don't understand is what happened to Luke could happen to anybody, them included, or their loved ones included. And I'm not going to say, I've said before, we need a more accountable media. We're not going to get one. And frankly, the ones that peddle this rubbish, hopefully it will come back to bite them. And I don't mean by finding themselves, wrongly. I just mean by the conviction being overturned and the information being out there for all to see, to show the level, the standard of the reporting. But one of the things I've just touching on that, you were talking about the difficulty of investigating what went wrong and how it went wrong. We are absolutely tied in this country because the information is not in the public domain, and you're really, really restricted to what you can put out. So, in the States, you can go and look at everything and work through it. You can't do that here. You can't, even transcripts. So say somebody came along tomorrow and said, "I've got £40,000 here. Go get the transcript. Go pay for the transcripts and get them." The first thing is, I can't just go to the court and say, "Give me the transcripts, there's the money." They go, "Yeah, we need good reason for why you want them." And again, good reason by their standards, not by ours. But then you've got the problem of what, even if we had the money and got every last statement, every last transcript, you've then got the problem of what we can put in the public domain. And where most people would say, well, those transcripts are public domain, so they should all be able to go out. It's not as straightforward as that. And I've been told over the years I cannot put them out in their entirety. I can quote from them, just like the media can, but I can't put them out in their entirety. Because if I could, every single one of them that's in my possession would be online. But I'm no good to anybody in jail.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I don't suppose you have much sympathy for the media, the fact that, when it comes to people working within the media, it's so highly competitive. We hear in Making a Murderer that, that all of the media outlets, they're all competing against one another to try, murder is what really sells. They're all competing against one another. They're all trying to get the best, the juiciest stories. I can't imagine that you've much sympathy for the media.
I understand that people have to make a living. But if you're going to go into journalism, maybe have a bit of integrity is all I would say. It's not all about money. It's not all about the juicy gossip. There's truth out there. This story is so outrageous that if the media had run with that, they'd have got the same response. The what? Instead of running with the sensationalist garbage. Because you're seeing what's happening now. The more people are finding out, the more they're going, whoa, wait, how did that happen? What's this? How can that be? If they'd chosen that route in their media coverage.
I kind of compare that with holding onto an ever-rising balloon. They can't let go. It's like the legal, as we've seen so much in Stephen Brendan's case, they just cannot let it go because the bottom line is it means having to say sorry. For what they've done. And what's really bizarre is that, I realize your work in trying to advocate for Luke and others. We don't have, unfortunately, here in Scotland, a Kathleen Zellner that's going to take the case pro bono and is going to sue for hundreds of millions. But really, that's I can't help thinking that's what we need here. It's people need to be held accountable.
There's not even really a system for that in this country. I mean, there are some ways that it can be done, but nothing like in the States.
I mean, I suppose, in fairness, is that not a good thing that we don't have the levels of wrongful convictions that they do in America? Is our system slightly more robust than theirs?
I wouldn't say so.
Okay.
In the last 2 weeks, I must have had maybe 12 to 15 people contact me to say, I've got a story just like this. In the last 18 years, dozens of families. And I've gone and I've looked at their cases and I've looked at their case papers and I've gone, yeah, you're right. Another one, another one, another one, another one. So the idea that it's extremely rare and just the occasional case, no, it's not. Not in this country, no, it's not.
I don't want to give them much time and much attention, but dealing with the trolls, how have you found it?
I just ignore them. Just ignore them. I don't understand trolls and what they do and why they do it. I don't.
I do. I understand that they were sold a story right from the word go, and they developed. They're not just guilters; they're haters.
Yeah,
and they don't just. Sorry to interrupt. They don't just think that Luke's guilty and evil as hell, but they think that anybody that associates themselves with Luke is equally so.
What was it I was called just this evening? A half-baked witch doctor. That was tonight's title, which is mild compared to some of the things I've been called, which is why I just don't give them the time of day, because you can't engage with these people. You can't use reason because they're not interested.
No,
In
they have cognitive dissonance.
Yeah, they're just
they
interested.
will come up with any excuse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I had it's very interesting that there was a question raised early on in the chat that I made a note of, and I do apologize because so many people have commented on the sidebar. I'm just lucky that one of the trolls hasn't mentioned my welding skills, but anyway, he knows who he is. He's a good friend of mine. So anyway, hiya, Baba. So there was a question about, rather than trial by media, and this is something that did happen once in America, in a very famous case, exonerated by media. Is there a danger that you could end up exonerating somebody that's guilty?
Of course.
But just the power of advocacy has caused this.
Of course. And I've said all along, I'm not asking anybody to believe me. Look at the information that's there. Weigh it up. Now, exoneration by media, so public pressure. What we're asking for is a complete review of the case. We're not saying, storm the doors of the court and overturn this conviction tomorrow. We're saying, get it looked at independently. Look at whether this was done properly, whether the evidence was followed up properly. Was the right person convicted on the basis of solid evidence? So it's not a case of exoneration by media. We wouldn't be able to railroad that anyway.
Well, they did one case in America, and I'm going to look at that one shortly, in a future video, because I think that it's fair, it's fair enough comment, but I can't help thinking that given the fact that there are so many obstacles in place, what you're now asking for, and I think what the petition is asking for, and I think it's up to like 20,000.
It's past
signed the petition, and the petitions basically says what?
We want an independent case review, full review of the case, because there are too many unanswered questions to say this conviction is safe. So the petition's not saying it's wrongful. It's simply saying, with all those unanswered questions, it can't be safe. We answer the questions, and it all goes away one way or the other. So that's why I made a point of making the petition about an independent review, rather than, let us get back to the Court of Appeal. They won't change anything in the system. If we want to go back to the Court of Appeal, it has to be on the basis of the rules that allow us to go back to the Court of Appeal. But the Hillsborough inquiry, was quite unique in the way it was done. And that proved that it can be done if the justice system has dug its heels in and is refusing to budge in the face of really, really serious questions. There is another way. And all we're saying is, let's do that in this case. Get it all. If they've got nothing to hide, if the justice system's got nothing to hide, let's get it out on the table. Let an independent panel see it. And then maybe I can retire and go in my camper van.
No chance. We're not letting you off that easy. One of the questions I asked the Sheriff Herman of Manifold County was that if Stephen Avery was guilty, why did he not just give up the fact that, he's facing lifetime in prison? Why doesn't he just say, yes, okay, I did it, but Brendan had nothing to do with it, just let him go? Because he was very close to Brendan. He is very close to Brendan. And the problem is then that if you then admit to having done it, you would then have to come up with a story as to how it was done. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but is Luke not spotted at 6 o'clock in the evening, casually sat on a wall?
Yeah, before 6 o'clock.
So run this by me then. So this idiot savant, he murders his girlfriend, who he's been going out with for 5 months.
3 to 5.
Three, yeah, okay. So he does it because he's possessed by Satan, okay, which is, as far as I can see, the only reason, that they've given. In fact, at trial, did they ever give a reason?
He was two-timing Jodie, apparently.
All right.
A girl 70 miles away, which is interesting because his only form of transport at the age of 14 was a push bike. So, 70-mile round trip, or 140-mile round trip on a push bike to see the other girlfriend. So that was one of the things he tried to claim, was that he was two-timing Jodie.
Sandra, we're trying to keep this serious now.
Listen, I don't make the rules. I don't make the story. I'm just recounting it. So yeah, they said that Jodie had found out about the other girl at lunchtime and had set out to challenge him about it. I'm still trying to figure out in what way that means.
Yeah.
That was reason to kill him.
I mean, the thing is, if he decides all of a sudden in a moment of, sort of, I've fed up with it, I'll just admit to it. He's then got to give, presumably, an account of, well, how did you do it?
Well, you would think so. But I know of another case where the account bore no resemblance to what actually happened in the crime scene and everything else. But they took it anyway because it suited them.
Did they? All right, okay. There was, and I do apologise if I'm going to go to your question and I missed the other ones, but there was another one that did strike me as being significant. In the Making a Murderer community, we are blessed, shall we say, with the fact that the documentary is 20 hours long.
Yeah.
2 hours. Was it enough to present everything that you wanted presented?
No. We always knew it wasn't going to be long enough. We always knew that the most we were going to do was highlight some of the difficulties. What we would love is a series like that, where we can start at the beginning and go through everything in the way that they did with Murder in a Small Town.
Yeah.
Address all the aspects, the stuff we've talked about tonight, the stuff we've talked about previously, and have them put together in the same way. So even following the lines of the book. So changing story, you've got the DNA, you've got the police investigation, you've got the media input, you've got the Satanism, you've got the gazillions.
You've got the Parker, you've got the penknife, all that kind of stuff.
All of that, and to be able to tell that story in its entirety in that format, I think would be. I think a lot of people seeing it that way would then have the opportunity to really think, does this tie up? Is this right? And that's all I want people to do. Yeah. Look at the evidence and ask yourself, is this good enough? Because it's done in your name. Is it good enough?
That's what certainly I challenged. So far, I've challenged 3 MPs or MSPs. I get confused about the differential. I really don't have any interest in politics, and I think that possibly is Well, I don't think so. I know that it's something that this case transcends politics. It's nothing to do with being on a political side. It's nothing to do with bias one way or the other. You know, we've got amongst the supporters now. I'm little Miss Sunshine. I had a chat with her last night. I said, you know, I am absolutely convinced that we have got people from all different walks of life. You know, you've got, you know, layperson like ourselves. You've got the private investigations in the documentary. You've got the Forensic Institute people. You've got QCs, defense lawyers that are all saying, wake up, smell the coffee. This is bizarre. This is wrong.
But interestingly, I've had contacts from legal experts, forensics experts from all over the world since the film went out. So it's not just our own homegrown experts that are questioning it now. You know,
yeah, you can definitely blame the Making a Murder community for part of that, because I tell you what, there is nothing more ferocious than a Making a Murder advocate. That'll, and they are the most ferocious, and they are spread around the world.
I don't know if you remember the famous or infamous McKee case, Shirley McKee case, a few years back.
Right.
They had experts. I can't remember how many it was, but it was dozens and dozens of experts from all over the world saying that the fingerprint evidence that they used to say that Shirley was at the scene was wrong, completely wrong. And eventually, they paid damages. But a couple of nights later, the spokesperson for the fingerprints unit went on TV and said she stood by their decision.
Yeah. So,
you know, even with all those experts saying that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong, and they had to back down. They still tried to cover themselves and say, well, we still think we were right.
Yeah, it's as I say, to me, it's like an ever rising balloon that you cannot let go of. I mean, me personally, I've already told the sheriff of Manitowoc, you know, if I'm wrong, if Kathleen Zellner comes back and says, you know, sorry guys, I've tried to pursue this as much as I can, but you know, my conclusion is that, oh well, Steve's guilty, then I would be the first to phone the sheriff of Manitowoc and say, you know, I'm sorry. I can't see that happening in that case. You know, we've been so far down the line in that case, and I don't see this happening here either. I just, you know, I do have sympathy, as I say, for the police in the early days trying to solve this, and the fact that it's so horrific and it's in their patch. You know, I do. I've expressed this to you before. Yeah. One final question before I let you go. In fact, probably two, but one sort of main one to do with Luke. Can people write to Luke?
Yes, but I would suggest hold off for a bit just now, because you'll be under a mountain of mail at the minute. But yeah, you can write to him at HMP Shots.
Okay, so is that something that people could find information on a website such as your Innocence Portrayed website, or would it be a Facebook group? I mean, I see that there's already a lot of Facebook groups out there.
There's so many groups have sprung up just wanting to talk about the case. Did you mean you were looking for an actual address for people to write to Luke?
So is there, well, people are used to, certainly the MAM community, with the fact that Stephen Brendan, they have a prison that they're in, and they have a prisoner number.
Yeah. So Luke's 89543.
8 89543.
Yeah, and then it's just HMP shots.
Honestly, do you know what I can do? I can actually type that in very, very slowly, but HMP. How do you spell shots? Is it SHO?
Double T.
S. And the prisoner number?
89543.
89543.
Yeah.
There you go. Loads of people have beaten me to it. I am that slow at typing. Anyway, it's been absolutely fantastic having you on for chat, and I do apologize that we didn't do this earlier. I suppose in mitigation, I would plead the fact that the documentary has made a massive difference. But I do apologize, because that really is no mitigation at all. We could have been talking about this case a lot sooner, and I do apologize. We did have obviously the loss of the dude. One final question. Every guest on this channel has to answer this particular question. I don't know if you know what's coming next. You do know what's coming next.
No, I'm just worried about the way that was asked. Go on then.
Nationality of Captain Crunch, American or British? He's over there in the corner.
I have no idea, so I'm going to guess American.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, dear. No, we like to finish on a light note. I know this is very, very serious, and we're not trying to take this lightly. It's been absolutely brilliant to have a chat with you, and I do apologize to everybody. There's been loads of people in the chat and have been asking questions, and I've been trying to keep a track of it. I suppose my final question would be, would you please come back and have another chat with me in the future?
Of course. Thank you so much just for having this discussion. It's more information out there. It's more things for people to learn and hear and understand. I'll have a look at the comments later. I don't have them on because I get all distracted. So I'll have a look at them, and if there's questions in there that I've not covered, I'll put them in the live on Sunday. And that's some more questions answered, just to keep as much information out there as we can possibly get out there, really.
Well, Sandra, much love and respect to you. As I say, I'm that old I can remember your dad, but I remember your dad buying me a drink in Melrose. So cheers.
I'm not got anything to cheers with.
Well, I'll tell you what, next time, get it sorted.
Right. Okay, I will.
Okay, and thank you. Sorry, I'm going to shut up and let you close proceedings. Give the lady the last words.
Just thanks to everybody that's shown an interest, that's out there talking about it, that's sharing, that's asking all the questions, the people that are asking for the book so that they can find out even more about it. Thank you. And to people like you, Paul, and Sharon, and the others who've asked me to come on and speak and answer questions and just keep getting the information out there. Thank you so much.